welcome back to another edition of the Cover One podcast. I'm Kevin Masseri, your host today, filling in for Eric Turner as he is off and about doing big things for the site, doing breakdowns, scouting school. He's got like a wide range of things going on. So, thank you in for tuning in. And, we really appreciate you guys coming on here today. So, Eric, as you know, we want to do a big shout out to the Lorenzo Alexander podcast that we had going on. That's one of the biggest things we've done. And, he put in a lot of work to get him on the show. And that was really cool to have him break down a lot of the different schemes and different defensive concepts we'll be running. So check that out if you haven't already. I'm sure most of you already have seen that. And, watch out for Eric's stuff coming down the pipeline, and all of our writers at cover1.net have a lot of big stuff coming and a lot of big news coming up soon. So follow in for that. It's a short season right now. People are out, summer vacation, 4th of July is coming up, lots of traveling, NFL players are gone. So we're going to keep it short and sweet, around 20 to 25 minutes today, and basically just talk about what we learned from OTAs, minicamps, bunch of questions here to get to, a lot of things going on that we can, tackle, but at the same time, we'll keep it short and interesting. So we won't get too crazy with this, but the first things first, as we just wrapped up a long OTA session, well, really a long mini camp session filled in with a mandatory OTA session, mini camps to wrap up the week last week. And, as we covered last time on podcast 24, Jeremy Maclin did sign away from us, and, looks like Eric Decker did sign too with Tennessee. So the Bills are unable to fill that wide receiver need that we had, based on what I was hearing from around different people, and a lot of different discussions were going on that maybe we didn't come in with a strong enough offer for Jeremy Maclin, but I don't know that that's true. I think we were right competitive with Baltimore, and he basically came out and said, "This is where I wanted to be from the start." His wife's from the area. There wasn't much we could do to compete with that stuff. So, check out podcast 24 for, between Eric and Nate to talk a little bit more about, that topic. But leading us into more of the roster talk and kind of what happened last week, you'll see that the wide receiver position, to me, is still pretty weak. You're starting with, your Sammy Watkins, who's coming off of, back-to-back surgeries, cutting nicely, looking good based on everyone that I've read and talked to. Looks like he's running routes. He looks like he'll come off a second surgery successful, like other of his, there's a lot of precedent there that will be okay. So I'm looking forward to seeing him as our number one receiver. But behind that, you have a Zay Jones combination and Andre Holmes, who, if you read my mentions, Andre Holmes is the second coming of Odell Beckham. So I'm going to be really excited to see him on special teams. I'm going to be excited to see him fill in as a third or fourth receiver. I don't know that I'm going to be ready to crown him a number two receiver and someone that can come in and really fill in a big, we have to fill 160 targets from last year. That's a lot to deal with. So there's a lot of targets that need to go around. I'm sure Charles Clay will eat up a lot of them, but don't forget, as a lot of people like to claim, he's very unproductive. There was a lot of targets thrown his way still last year. So I wouldn't completely call Charles Clay someone that we haven't utilized. I think we could utilize him more just because he's that good and he's one of the best run blocking tight ends in the league. But I don't believe that there's missing targets there for Clay. I mean, he can probably grab another 20 targets. I'd like to see him more regularly used in the middle of the field. But he's a really good player, and we'll continue to use him. And he does possess a large cap number. So it's a hot topic right now about that and his cap number and what he should be producing for that amount of money. Leading us into, before we break down a little bit more about the roster and some of the questions, the video today that came out from Barstool Sports about tailgating. There's people on every side of this fence, and I tend to sit right in the middle. I do think that some of the antics around tailgating is absolutely bizarre. I don't know what some of these fans are doing. They're on camera admitting that, they're coming for the tailgate, not really interested in the sport. That's the kind of thing we need to weed out of professional sports, and it doesn't do us any good. We need to put a winning product on the field first, but that's really bizarre to go there and hurt yourself and ruin things and ruin areas and binge drinking. It's bizarre, and those are the reasons that the stadium's going to move downtown. However, I come from a long lineage of liking to tailgate. Tailgating's fun. it's awesome. It really gets you in the mood to go. But the game is the first and the most important thing. That's why we have these Cover One podcasts, because the game, rules all. The game is the thing that you're going to see. The game is the thing that keeps everyone entertained. You try to find ways to have fun even when your team sucks, or you're in the midst of a 3-13 season. I understand. But when you're fairly average and competitive in game in and game out, you'll start to see different types of antics come in and out. So that's all I have to say on that issue. I know there's heated debates all over the place right now, especially today. It's down season, and that's really all there is to talk about. That's live news. So I'm on the opinion that I think some of the strong stuff needs to stop, and you're going to see the Bills move downtown because they don't want that reputation. Terry Pagula wants nothing to do with it. So leading us into, really why these conversations exist, and that's to cover the team and the sports and the, what you're going to see aspect of it. I think, you got to look at the depth chart, right? And that's the number one thing people talk about. And a lot of people break down depth and, what's going on and where we're missing players. And I'm really on every podcast that I'll go on breaking down depth, because I think there's always a misconception on what is depth and what is a starting level player and what is a superstar. Everyone considers depth equal to 7 superstars. That's not depth. Depth isn't having, your top end players, your Marcel Darius behind Marcel Darius behind Marcel Darius. That's not depth. That's having 3 starting all-star player defensive tackles at one position. That's not depth. That also equals depth, but that's not the only way to have depth. And there's a lot of positions on the team to me that do have depth. The biggest strength to me, and I still think this, and I proved it by cutting Cyrus Quangio, and that's the offensive line. I think you brought back everyone you had last year. You added in Deion Dawkins and Vlad Dukas, and you're potentially getting Chantrell Henderson back as well at some point, after week 5. One of the questions by Dean was, do you see Chantrell, making a push, and Walt Powell? Well, I find this very interesting, because 2 guys that have roster exemptions through week 4, Chantrell through week 5, but through at least week 4, meaning they don't take up space on your team's cap and on the team's roster needs. So they will in the 90-man roster, but once roster cuts come, they'll be put on the reserve list. And that's 2 roster spots that we open up and can do different things with. So why expose Walt Powell and Chantrell Henderson to other teams until week 4 and week 5? Unless they really don't have it, unless we don't really think anyone's interested in them, and they don't even have any ability left or enough to play in the NFL, fine, cut bait. And I think they would have already, though. If Walt Powell wasn't going to be put on that reserved list, as well as Chantrell, and maybe they will shortly into training camp. But if they show up in shape and performing, it's a bonus to me to miss that first set of cuts. So here, you're going to have to compete with everyone to make cuts. Well, guess what? The Bills know that they can put Walt Powell and Chantrell Henderson on the reserve list, right? So that's like an automatic way into week 4. And that gives you 4 or 5 more weeks to show yourself once you can come back off suspension. And that gives you 4 or 5 more weeks that the roster could face injuries. Different things could happen. You might need to move some pieces around and then need to pluck a receiver. And guess what? You just happen to be coming off suspension. So with his ability, with Walt Powell's ability to play special teams and to add that another piece to like the 5th or 6th receiver, I don't think there's any reason to cut ties with him. He's a free roster spot. You're getting 2 extra players between him and Chantrell Henderson that can add 2 pieces to the puzzle. When people are getting hurt or not performing, then you can bring them right in off your suspension list. So I think they're 2 decent players in their own respect that you can bring in after 4 or 5 weeks that you couldn't normally do that without exposing him to waivers and potentially other things, other rosters that he could be on, even if he doesn't get claimed off of waivers. So I don't see the need really to cut these guys, unless they really have no business playing in the NFL. So that is one topic I'm passionate about. I think just like Bill Belichick likes to do, likes to find ways around the system, right? And one way around the system, well, take a bad thing that happened in these guys getting suspended with Chantrell, unfortunately with his medical condition, and Walt, saying he didn't know what he was putting in his body, and getting that roster exemption. You might as well use it to your team advantage. You might as well say, you know what? They missed the cut date. That's a really hard day in the first place. They can go right from training camp, right from the 4th preseason game, right to your suspension list, which to me is 2 extra roster spots. They can't play, both of them probably wouldn't play right away anyways. They're more of those depth roster pieces that you normally couldn't have the luxury of keeping. So I can't predict that they're going to play well in training camp, but right now I would have to think that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are thinking, 55-man roster because these two guys are there. So week 4 and 5 is when, if they didn't do enough to show that they should be on the roster and there wasn't any injuries, which is great, then maybe at that point you do have to cut ties. But I do think Seantrell Henderson's safe, or he would have been gone. Walt Powell, not quite as much, not as safe, but I do think he makes it to that roster exemption list. I don't think there's a reason to even give him to another team. Might as well keep him. There's no reason to not. So that's one. Those are two players I wanted to talk about, anyways. Just due to I'm trying to get out there, think about the big picture and those guys. There's no need to irrationally cut them. They're not making tons of money. There's no reason to get them off your roster. And I don't think that there's any reason to make the move there until you have to. You keep them on your roster until you need to evaluate them coming off suspension. And I believe, I could be wrong on 4-game suspensions. Seantrell might have a different thing. You don't have to take him off right away. I'll have to look into that more. I'm not quite sure. But someone like Seantrell, I do believe you have another week. I'm going to look into that. If you can keep him on that list for another week and not activate him, but at some point you do have to make the move to take him off that list. So those extra roster spots are big to me. That's just a way to have 55 guys on your roster and protect from week 1 through 4 to 5 injuries. So that is something big for me. And speaking on the offensive line, I mean, you have, to me, Ryan Groy, who was looked at as a starting level interior lineman. He played like it last year, filling in for Eric Wood. So you have your starting line of, Cordy Glenn, Richie Incognito, Eric Wood, John Miller, and Deion Dawkins. And Dawkins has been everything as advertised. To get him in the second round, he's probably one of my favorite picks off of these OTAs and minicamps. That he's looking like he could play left tackle at some point. So that's huge. That was one of our weakest spots. So to be able to plug him in and have him, going through with Cordy with his walking boot, he should be fine. But you know how these things go, especially with the Bills, that we don't know what could be happening with Cordy Glenn and if he's long term or not. It does look like he'll be back for training camp at some point. Probably will start off in the PUP list to start the year, and come off it at some point in training camp is what I would guess. But if not, you have Deion Dawkins that can slide left tackle. Okay, and then you still have Jordan Mills, who we'll see what, he's supposed to be developing again, and he's supposed to be looking decent as compared to last year. So, Mills is a 6th or 7th offensive lineman, doesn't offend me. Mills is the 4th or 5th guy, that's worse. But him coming in to fill in for injuries, that's who you're going to have at right tackle. That's who's going to be behind those guys. I don't know anyone else with a better situation that if you lose a guy like Cordy Glenn or Deion Dawkins, I don't know who these third linemen are that, people are thinking are behind these guys. So to have Mills, who has some experience and is okay in certain situations, did struggle last year, was better the year prior. I think that the position of offensive line is still one of my favorites. And then you're still looking at John Miller versus Vlad Dukas as a battle, and John Miller played a lot better. So now you have, to me, 8 offensive linemen, and then 9 if you add Patrick Lewis, and 10 if you add Seantrell Henderson there, and that's a pretty good 10 offensive linemen. So you get 9 until week 5, and then you'll need to make a move. And if Patrick Lewis is the 9th guy there, if he makes the roster, I think he does. So offensive line is a position of depth and strength. I don't see where, if anyone's ever complained about it, where it's coming from. They led the league in rushing. They led the league in rushing attempts through certain areas of the field. So meaning, if anyone would have touched the ball, they would have gotten the most yards per carry for an average level replacement. So more of a baseball stat, but that's where kind of jumped out for me as, LaShawn McCoy could beat down the defense. And then in comes Mike Gillislee, and able to read that big blocking scheme and go right down the field. So I don't think there's as much of a problem there. Losing Gillislee either. I'm fine with the running back depth. One big thing I've been reading, and we're getting into now the running back and fullback situation, is that Mike Tolbert is going to get way more running back carries than anyone could think of at this point. So Mike Tolbert's going to get those carries. He's really our backup running back at this stage. Him versus Jonathan Williams. So between those two, I do think you have enough talent there to get by. you can check roster waivers come August, and then you have obviously Patrick DeMarco, who was lined up in different sets, and he's going to be used way more versatile than you think, and he's not going to be your traditional matching fullback. We're going to use him in many different situations and in many different packages and move positions. And he was, split out in wing back throughout OTAs. So you're not just going to get your fullback, blocking up the middle, like some of his predecessors. So you'll see 5 there. The 5th, I believe, will be Jordan Johnson. I got to watch him throughout his whole career at UB, being a big UB fan myself. I really see Jordan Johnson making it as the 5th back on the team. I do. I think he's, your guy that you'll use if someone gets hurt. I think he has enough talent. He has enough twitch. Played on a terrible offense last year. Still was their best player by far. Used to needing to make his own space. So when he does get space, a lot of times you'll see these guys used to having huge holes in college and used to huge passing spread offenses and just be able to run up the middle or whatever. Jordan Johnson's not the case. He's used to a pro-style offense at UB, that Lance Leipold's offense. He's used to needing to make his own space like bad Bills teams have passed. So he's going to be one of those guys to me that I think will come in and against third teamers and impress. Obviously have the caveat, anyone needs to stay healthy. So yes, Dean, I do see 2 fullbacks and 3 running backs. That's definitely what I see. I see more like 3.5 running backs and 1.5 fullbacks, because I even think Mike Tolbert might even skew running back. He might play certain situations in a fullback role, but we said this when he first signed. He's almost more of a running back. So that's really between him and John Williams. That was the reason we were able to let Mike Gillislee go, because everyone just considers him a special teamer, Mike Tolbert, and he's going to bring that special teams ability. He's going to bring some of that fullback stuff, but you're really getting a goal line back, and you're getting a guy who's been productive in Carolina and throughout his career. So, he's a short yardage guy that's going to be used as such, and you'll see him in different packages even prior to losing Mike Gillislee. So I think the positional group's fine there. If we face an injury or Jordan Johnson doesn't come out as the same way I think he will, I think that's where you'll start to see maybe us looking at the waiver wire. There will be running backs, especially in August, September region, that will, be able to be picked up as a third guy. That's where we got Mike Gillislee. So I don't really see any problems with waiting it out. Those guys can come right in usually. There's no problem there for me to wait it out if the 5th guy in this rotation isn't going to be used, or we didn't find him throughout the group of 3 that we have with Banyard, O'Neal, and Jordan Johnson. So being Dean, definitely Tolbert is definitely a really good PFF second-rate ranked pass blocker. Definitely, he does possess the ability to be used in certain packages, protect the quarterback, and I think you're already going to see that anyways. You can do a zone read with him because you're gonna fake handoff to Mike, and then you're gonna be able to find your hole. He's gonna lead block for you, so you're gonna have different options, and you can stick it in his gut sometimes, and you can and let him run. So I think you'll see him in different situations, and we are already planning to do so. On top of his special teams ability is great. So that's definitely I'm cool with the way that our backs are looking. I'm cool with the way our offensive line is working. If you look at the tight end position, that's one that's interesting to finish off on the offense positions. You're looking at Charles Clay, fine, good number 1 in my opinion. You have Nick O'Leary. I think you have a little bit. I think he's more of a third tight end that's going to be playing in a second tight end role. A lot of people like him. I'm not as impressed with him. I don't really see the receiving ability that he possessed in college. I think he did develop as a blocker way more than I thought. So I think that's what's going to keep him sticking around, with the ability to have a little bit of athleticism. But I'd like to see an upgrade at this position, and that's literally why you saw Gary Barnidge come in and walk through and come meet the team. Disappointed he didn't sign off the bat, really was. Thinking about it, we are letting guys leave more than often on these visits, so I'm not sure what's going on there. If we're just like, hey, what's up? Here's an offer, and we're not going to budge. I'm not sure what's going on in our official visits leading into Barnidge and Macklin, Trey Boston, all types of different scenarios here. And I'm not sure if we're not coming up with the right things to say. If we're just like, no, you got to come and compete. We're not saying the right, you're going to start day one type of thing. But I would like to see Gary Barnidge as the only one left that has any value to me on the free agent market that we would be interested in, and would immediately come in and be that number 2 tight end to me with Nick O'Leary behind him. And then that would shore up that group. All of a sudden that group's pretty decent to me. And then behind them you have, Logan Thomas, which I'm really excited to see. He's going to bring him up. He's one of the most excited people I'm going to be during training camp to see. I want to see, did he possess any of those tight end skills? Is he ready to go? And then you have, just your run-of-the-mill Wes Saxton, Keith Tobridge, and Jason Kroom. Do think one of them could sneak on the team. So if we do decide to go 4 tight ends for some reason, or even 3, I do think one of those guys are going to sneak on the team, one of those undrafted 2 free agents. So, and Stryker said, I think DeMarco was signed to be more of right end kind of fullback. Definitely. He's going to be seeing in different positions. He's not going to just be your inline fullback in your I formation or, your weak formations. He's going to we've already spread him out in different types of moving sets like that. So I definitely think that that's completely true. So that's my opinion of the offense to date. Notes from camp, looking through here, reading some notes that I have from camp, Corey Brown seemed to have a good camp like I expected. Is returning some punts, is in that rotation on special teams, is going to be one of the guys that steps up immediately. I do think he's going to take some of those targets away. He was one of my favorite signings of the offseason. Really no doubt there. I obviously mentioned Andre Holmes having a good camp, camp up to training camp, I should say. So those are some of the guys that jumped out. Deion Dawkins, looked really good. Zay Jones looked good. And, leading into the quarterback position, I think Nathan Peterman possesses some talent. TJ Yates, I think there's a good battle there. I don't think there's any way Cardale Jones makes the team. I would love to even get a 6th-round pick for him, 7th-round pick if we can. He's the old regime. We're going to give him a training camp. Definitely no reason not to. Don't see him on the team in September. No chance. He's not this guy. He's not this team. Peterman's basically his direct replacement, and Yates is the veteran backup. So I don't see any way Cardale Jones makes the team outside of an injury to Peterman or Yates. I don't see any way he makes the team. So I'll say that I'm 99% sure he doesn't make the team. So you can ask me again in August if he shows out. Won't be hard to beat out TJ Yates, but there's no reason to keep it. He just cannot connect on a single pass. Following videos out of camp when media were in the building, he was missing throws left and right. So I couldn't be more firm that I don't think Cardale Jones has a future with the Buffalo Bills. I don't see him putting it together. I don't think he gets enough time. I don't think he's good. He's useless to me. Could he change my opinion? Sure, he's young enough to change my opinion. He's got 1 training camp left to do that, but I don't see it. And that's where I think Peterman becomes the number 2 quarterback sooner rather than later. If something happened early in the season to Tyrod, you would see Yates play. If something happened later in the year, I think you would see Peterman play. So that's kind of my opinion on the offense in whole. Transitioning to the defense, the defensive line looked as good as people were expected last year. All of these guys are excited to be back in the 4-3. All of them, everyone that's been interviewed, anyone that's been mentioned, they're not going to say they're not, but in this case, I literally believe that they're excited to be in the 4-3 system and play with this high aggression speed and less complication, more straightforward for these guys. And they're 4-3 players. A lot of them are. So, if you got Shaq Lawson, that's, looking like he's got that burst, and Jerry Hughes waiting, foaming at the mouth to get in there. And, obviously Kyle Williams, Marcel Darius. I think there could be a little bit more depth on defensive end. Ryan Davis is a good third defensive end. I don't have a problem with him, but behind him, there's nothing. So that is a position, and I don't like to use it much, that there isn't any depth at. Could use another guy that could come off the street there, definitely. I don't have a problem with Adolphus Washington. I think he's a nice 3rd defensive tackle. I know this staff likes DeAndre Coleman a lot and Jarrell Worthy. So you do have some pieces there. That's more the depth I'm talking about. You're not going to get a ton better than that behind your starters. Still don't know who these teams are that are rolling out. Marcel Darius is behind Marcel Darius's. So to me, that's fine. You're sufficient there. You can win games with that group of defensive tackles. Going into linebacker position, you're getting a little weaker, but that Gerald Hodges signing really helped. And Stryker asked a little while ago what you have to say about the linebackers and who the starters might be. I think it's pretty easy to me. I really do. I think you can chop it up and cut it up and discuss it all you want. You can try to keep players off the field, but I think you'll see a Reggie Ragland and Preston Brown on the field at the same time with Lorenzo Alexander in there. I think you'll see Lorenzo, the way I know this, I think you'll see Lorenzo in certain passing situations. Obviously watch our breakdown with Eric Turner to get more about Lorenzo and where you'll see him fit. But I still think he'll put his hand in the dirt and play 4-3 defensive end in third down situations, which will allow Gerald Hodges on the field. You can keep mix and match those linebackers. So to me, I want to say there's going to be 4 starting linebackers depending on the packages. You might see 3 on the field when we're in base. You might see 2 rotating 2 on the field in different packages that you're in, depending on what we're trying to accomplish on the field. So I think you're going to see Lorenzo Alexander, Reggie Ragland, Preston Brown, and Gerald Hodges, and Ramon Humber in certain other very basic packages and special teams. He's going to be our special teams key cog. I'm fine with the position group. Is it lacking some elite talent? I believe so, yeah. Is it lacking depth? No. Once again, differentiations between depth and elite talent. Is it missing elite talent? Yes. Is it missing depth? No, I don't believe it is. After you put on Gerald Hodges, you also you used a 5th and a 6th round pick. You have Matt Milano and Tanner Vallejo. Jacob Lindsey's a guy that's been covered a lot. He's a guy that I think can sneak on the team as a last linebacker. But then you have guys that we just claimed like Carl Bradford. You have Ian Seau that could play strong side linebacker or defensive end. You have Abner Logan. You have a couple of guys there, Max Vales, who's been in the system now since Rex Ryan, that's survived. He's been one of half of the only, we turned over half our roster. He survived it. So he must possess something this staff likes. So there are some talent there in the linebacking unit. There's definitely depth. I think there's depth there. I think if you lost Ramon Humber, I don't think you see a setback. If I think Zoe might, I don't want to say he could be irreplaceable in what he's asked to do. But between Reggie Ragland and Preston, you're not going to lose much if you lost one. Gerald Hodges is there, Matt Milano's there, Tanner Vallejo's there. I'm real cool on that linebacking unit. I think it's better than probably most do. I've liked it. I think all you were really doing is filling in for Zach Brown, and you're able to do that with Gerald Hodges, Tanner Vallejo, Matt Milano, a healthy Reggie Ragland. So you're telling me how that'd be a downgrade? I'm not sure. So a lot of things that I've been hearing are, the Bills are going to be worse. I think the schedule's a little harder right now before we play any games. I think the schedule's a little harder than last year. Some tough games. I don't think that there is no way that this team is worse. None. There is no way that this team is worse based on talent. It just isn't. You lost Robert Woods. You lost Mike Gillislee. We've already talked about those position groups. And you've lost Zach Brown and Stephon Gilmore. And we're getting into defensive backs in a second. So, talking about the linebacking unit in particular, that's what we're on. So the defensive line to me is the same and better. Everyone's healthy. Now you have Adolphus Washington in a backup role, Ryan Davis in a backup role. Linebacking core to me is better. I liked Zach Brown a little bit more on a higher end, but then behind him is just unquestionably better than what we were bringing in behind Zach Brown last year that we just went over. And then lastly, into defensive backs, Tre'Davious White's been everything that we've asked. He's been as advertised. You can ask people close to me, Twitter. You can ask. I don't overly always think you want to, replace a guy with a guy. So let Gilmore go and then use a first-round pick to replace him. Not always my favorite thing to do. But Tre'Davious White's been as advertised. Getting him where we got him on top of the first-round pick next year that I'm not even considering. He's, I don't believe, going to be too big of a step back from him. So you already have Ronald Darby, who played the cornerback position last year. I do not believe Tre'Davious White is going to be a massive step back from Gilmore. Off the bat, you might lose a little bit, but I think over time you're going to gain on some of the lapses that Gilmore had, and he just struggled last year. I'm a Gilmore fan, wish we kept him, but he did struggle, and I don't think he's irreplaceable. He's definitely not, especially now that we used the first-round pick to do it. Going into, guys that are just not talked about, Kevon Seymour. He's going to be mixed in and out, with the second and third cornerback spot all camp. He's going to get that. He's going to get those reps. He was great in college. He's got great speed. I just think, him falling to the 6th round last year was great. I mean, we got him there, and I really like him as a third, fourth cornerback. We've had some Justin Rogers and other players that just do not have any business being a fourth cornerback. I think that Kayvon Seymour's a great third cornerback. And then that's not even to mention, Leonard Johnson, who could be a fine slot corner. You have, I actually really do like Sharice Wright, outside of his Uber story. I liked him prior to that. I think that he's a fine third or fourth cornerback. So I think you've heard me use third or fourth cornerback, which means that there's depth, which means, once again, you're not going to have Richard Sherman behind Ronald Darby in your defense. So you're going to have Sharice Wright, and last year's starter, Sharice Wright, now he's a depth player, and Leonard Johnson, depth player, Kayvon Seymour, depth player / nickel corner. You got a lot of mix and matching going on there, and that's not even to mention some of the potential behind them in Bradley Sylvie or Charles James or Greg Mabin or Marcus there's got Marcus Sales. There's guys there. There's guys there that I want to see, and I do think one of the sixth cornerback spot will go to one of those guys. So I do think you're going to see an undrafted free agent like Greg Mabin sneak on, as he had a ton of talent. So as a college free agent, he just got caught. We claimed him right away. He did come off a gruesome injury, but he possessed a lot of talent and was looking like a 3rd-round pick prior to his injury. So, Dean, absolutely. I don't think enough people are talking about Leonard Johnson. I'll go with Eric to kind of talk about Leonard Johnson a little bit more, as I want to watch more tape on him, but he was his nickel back in corner. He has an inside track, but loves Seymour. Absolutely. He was switching in and out at nickel all off season so far. So you'll see it more. I think, and his ability to play special teams too. I do think Leonard Johnson at this point is on the team to me. So if I was to quickly put, my 6th corner, I think we keep 6 in this defense, especially when you're always a nickel. I think Ronald Darby, Tre'Davious White, Leonard Johnson, Kayvon Seymour, Sharice Wright, and right now it's tough for me to find that 6th, but a guy like Marcus Sales or Bradley Sylvie could make the team. And I know someone asked me about Bradley earlier in my Twitter feed, asked me what I thought of him. I think he possesses a lot of talent. You're right. He's on a good defense. He's one of those guys that could definitely sneak up on you in preseason. Absolutely. He possesses that talent. Really good coach. Really got a kid that was able to be coached throughout school. Didn't have phenomenal stats in college, but does possess the talent. Absolutely, he's in the running for that 6th cornerback spot. He's going to need to play teams. He's going to need to learn to play teams. I don't know if he can, but that 6th cornerback spot is going to go to someone that can play teams. So I think there's guys there that I love these depth players here, better than some that we've had in the past. And lastly, kind of touching on that safety position, and I got a couple of questions in here. Looking at it, you have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Micah Hyde, you're going to see a lot as that big nickel role. He said he already can't wait to talk trash to the big guys. He's going to drop down in the box a lot. He's going to play in different packages. So he just adds a little bit more to that cornerback role, and can play safety. Jordan Poyer is a guy that I thought was starting to turn it on in Cleveland before that kidney injury. I think he's a fine safety. I mean, I don't have any problems with him starting. We went out and got him right on day one. I like him. He's someone that I'm looking forward to seeing. Now, here's what I'll say. Behind those two guys, though, I will, once again, just like I did at the end, I will say that I do not like anything behind this. So day one, I think we're looking strong at the safety position. After Aaron Williams went down, all we had was really Corey White and a mixed match of, a Hedebo and a bunch of mixed matched guys with Corey Graham. And I do believe Poyer and Hyde are an upgrade to what we were playing last year, especially as Corey Graham started to get abused later in the year. As he really did. And I was a Corey Graham fan, and played well in the beginning and started getting abused once Aaron Williams went out. Unless these guys are mix and matching, he just started to lose it. But so I definitely think that this is an upgrade. The Hyde Poyer combination is an upgrade to what we were playing last year, as that safety position was terrible. I mean, maybe I'm not saying much, but I believe that that's an upgrade. Behind it, though, a little worrisome like last year. You have Cole Anderson, Trey Alston, who might be my favorite guy behind them. So Trey Alston, I think right now to me is my 3rd safety. You have Shamil Gary, Joe Powell, and BT Sanders. You're going to keep 4, especially more than that with these guys. I do think that Trey Elson's your third and Colt Anderson's your fourth at this minute. Colt Anderson can also play teams. So do think there's going to be a move there to be made at some point, as Trey Boston was going to be signed potentially as a spot starter at one point maybe a month ago now. So I do think if there's any cuts there at that position, Jairus Bird's been thrown around a lot, maybe, but if there's any cuts there at that position, you'll see us definitely grab one of those guys and to bring him in. And, there's upgrades across the board on this team and coach too. There's an upgrade at coach, right? Another question was getting into special teams. What is going on with our guy, Colton Schmidt? I mean, I being an ex-punter in my younger years myself, I don't think Colton Schmidt is very good at all. I don't think he has any leg strength. I think he tries to compensate on control and misses. He doesn't pin people back. His net's bad. His gross is bad. I don't think he's a very good kicker. I don't think he has any business making this team. I have no idea why we keep bringing him back. Didn't give him an RFA, but then signed a little bit less of a deal than the RFA tender. So, I mean, right now he's in the track to start, but then you got a guy like Austin Rickow behind him. Rickow can kick, he can punt, he can kick off. That might be enough to push him as a starting punter. I mean, the ability that if something happened to Hauschka in the game, that you could have him come in and hit a 50-yard field goal, 45-yard field goal, whatever is realistic. It's uncanny. I mean, Hauschka should never get hurt. Absolutely. He should never get hurt. But it does happen on a game-to-game basis where you might need to take an emergency kick or an emergency kick off, and you have that ability to do that, and you definitely don't need to keep a kickoff guy if you keep him. So, yeah, thanks, Dean Rico. I'm really good at pronunciation, but he gets me sometimes, and he follows me on Twitter, and I apologize. So, Rico, I should learn to say that better, as I'm usually pretty good with pronunciations. But disagree with you on Schmidt. Why? I mean, why Striker? What do you see in Schmidt that you like? I mean, I'm willing to listen. Look up his stats on your own. I mean, I don't know what you see what you would disagree on. Maybe you don't feel as strongly about it as I do, but I'm not sure what there is to disagree with. I don't think he's very good. I mean, he just look up where he ranks and whatever stat you want to pull, whatever one of the punting stats that are important to you. Tell me what you see in him other than being our punter that you like. I don't, you can comment if you have anything on him that, you think that Schmidt deserves whatever you like about Colton Schmidt. I'll take that from anyone throughout the day. Schmidt is last in NFL in yards. Yeah, probably. Definitely. I'll take comments from anyone on Colton Schmidt throughout any of this week. Send me questions or comments on why you think Colton Schmidt is good. I hear this all the time. Like, Colton Schmidt's good. Certainly at what position? At what stat category are you using that tells me that Colton Schmidt is good at, kicking? Let's see here. I needed to wrap up with some questions. Long-term Cardell or Yates? Long-term? Interesting. Yates, just because, as I said earlier in the show, I don't think Cardell's very good. So even though he's older, I'm going to go with TJ Yates. Does Cardell have practice squad eligibility left? Yeah, he would. He would, definitely. So I don't potentially keep a fourth quarterback, one on the practice squad. That's more used if you have two quarterbacks in your active roster. And then, so if someone gets hurt and say we only have Peterman and say Yates gets hurt and we only have Peterman and Tyrod on the roster and we didn't want to use a spot on Cardell and put him on the 53, then I would definitely see him as a practice squad candidate. And Dean, I know you asked me a lot here. Already touched on cornerback. Surprise members of the 53. Marquavius Lewis, definitely. I mean, I definitely think he's a surprise. I don't think Da'Keil Shorts can do enough to make it that crowded average wide receiver group. I do actually like him, but he would have to see some injuries in front of him and play really good in training camp. It's all possible, but it's really actually surprisingly hard to do at wide receiver to make it on the team. Every year, the Bills will have a guy that you think will make it and doesn't. It's just such a hard position to make it. There's so many things behind the scenes we don't see in practices and one-on-one and route running ability and what's their special teams, how they're cutting, how they're pressing, different things that they're doing that, it's hard for us to know why he didn't make the team, even though he's putting up a little bit in preseason. So I definitely think Marquavius Lewis is one of my favorites to make it. And we've already talked about some weak areas in the defensive line group, depending on if he's versatile, if he can play a few different positions along the defensive line. Right now he's listed as a D tackle, maybe in different run sets. He can do different things. I think that would help his bid to be one of my sleepers to make the team. And lastly, Stryker said, Schmidt is fast and young. Ryan didn't respect that. This will allow us to fake punts more. I believe McD will do this. Okay. I said I would listen to things. Athletic like Brian Moorman. Sure. Okay. I'll have to look more into that. But we'll give him a plus in athleticism. So, Schmidt can run the fake punt for us. So, okay. I'll definitely take that into consideration, but how often do you fake punt, and especially from your punter, and not be on Andy Reid? Maybe once a year. So even if he gets a 1+ in that, that's one play. Sure. I'll give him that, but that's not going to go for a lot of the missed hits he hits. I believe there was like a 4 or 5 week stretch he didn't get one inside the 20. I'll have to look what weeks those were, but he was poor. He's okay during times, but he can be brutal to watch. So we already addressed Schmidt. Behind Darius' worthiness, final year A. Washington. Behind Mika Hyde is Shamil Gray. Joe Powell, what is bigger depth problem? Safety. Yeah, to me, safety. I'm fine with defensive tackle. I like Adolphus Washington. I like Worthy. I like Coleman. I think there's some players there. I'm not as worried about defensive tackle. I think that's fine. Safety is a bigger issue for sure. If you keep 5 fullback, we addressed that and definitely talked about the roster positions. And anyone that's just tuned in, I'll harp it to you guys too. 55-man roster if you're keeping if you're wanting to keep Chantrell Henderson and Walt Powell. 55 men that can definitely play a little bit of a role into who you're keeping in the last couple of roster spots, knowing you have an offensive tackle and a wide receiver coming off week 4 and week 5. You can maybe keep a position heavier at a different role. Maybe only keep 5 receivers. I don't know. Maybe keep 1 less offensive lineman because those guys are coming back. So it does give you flexibility and versatility, like you see it within a position group. You can see that versatility playing the roster game. You don't want to expose these guys to waivers. So maybe you'll keep in a guy you don't need to expose to waivers now because you have 2 guys on suspension that you can keep for free. This is what Bill Belichick does daily. So he thinks of ways to do this. And that's pretty much all I got for you. And thanks for tuning in. And one of any last questions on there? Doesn't look like there's any. I wanted to touch up quickly on the roster right now, how I completed that. And lastly, some late season predictions. Looking through the schedule right now, we'll run that through real quick. I'd like to see if anyone disagrees with this. I want to get this on air and then give you guys your night back. Schedule, Jets, that's a win. At Carolina, I think we win that, 2-0. Denver, I think we win that, 3-0. Atlanta's a loss. I do think we'll probably fall to at Cincinnati this year, so I got us at 3-2. Tampa Bay at home, I'm going with the win. That's 4-2. Oakland probably will run us 4-3. I think we'll beat New York 5-3. New Orleans, man, I never liked playing Drew Brees. I'm going to put that as a win. So I got us at 6-3, and it's a really aggressive. LA, we're going to go and lose. Just absolutely lose. 6-4. Kansas City, I don't like Kansas City this year though. 7-4 to me. New England's a loss. 7-5. Indianapolis at home's a win. 8-5. Miami at home, they'll probably beat us. I like their roster a lot. 8-6. Another New England loss. 8-7. That last game of the year at Miami, seeing as I had us lose at home, I'll say we might win that in a meaningless fashion and go 9-7 or 8-8, and that's definitely right where I have us at this point. Definitely better than last year, so we'll say 9-7, splitting with Miami, losing both New England games and beating both the Jets games. So 3-3 in the division, and I think 9-7 is perfectly where I place them. I think it's a great first year for Sean McDermott. If something bounces our way in one of those games that I called like the Chargers game, the Bengals game, that could be the game that pushes you to 10-6 and potentially breaks that streak at 10-6. But I do see a 9-7 schedule here at this point. Won't take much for me to be a little bit more optimistic. the 9-7 after seeing training camp. If I see some of this depth that I'm talking about come to fruition, then maybe I'll give us that 10th win. But right now, I see 9-7. Thoughts on Roscoe Parrish? Cam? I do know my wife's sister has a cat named after him. So how about that for a fact? That his name is Roscoe. So that would be what I got for you on Roscoe Parrish. And that was one of the biggest things I wanted to go over. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll do this, we'll try to do this early in the week. It'll be tough in the off season when I don't have as much material as I did today to talk about. Eric and I will butt heads and see if we can come up with a show. And, he'll be on too, so he'll be able to bring a little bit more of his real analysis. I can give you good analysis. Eric can really take it to the next level of breaking down some of the things, expanding on some of the things I'm saying, expanding on some of those run schemes and defensive fits that will run and why people are excited to be in a 4-3. So definitely tune into episode 26, which will have Eric and myself on it, and guests. We have big things that cover one seriously. Eric's being recognized by a lot of different things. We're getting picked up by a lot of different news ideas. So tune in. Thanks again for coming. You can check the show out if you weren't able to attend live. Thanks for tuning in at that point too. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you shortly.